There will be. Government has to take a number of decisions. And I think as we take these decisions, it will be clear that we are on the reform path and we will continue on that path.
When's the country going to return to 9% growth?
Tell me, when is the world going to return to 4% growth? I think we will return to 9% growth once we address certain fundamental constraints. But as we address these issues and our savings rate goes up and investment rate goes up to, say, 37% or 38%, we will return to the 9% growth rate.
With your reforms, you've changed the weather. The headlines are better for your government, but the climate is still the same. People still believe that there is widespread corruption in this government. And what are you doing about it?
See, I don't share such generalized statements. What we are doing about corruption is we are putting in place systems, procedures to deny people an opportunity of being corrupt.
But there have been a raft of scandals during the term of this government, and most Indians say that they have to deal with corruption in part of their daily life, and they assume that most ministers at some point will take bribes. Let me ask you the question. Have you received a bribe or an inducement in your job?
If you can find one person in India or anywhere in the world who will stand before me and say, I gave you a rupee as a bribe, just find one person who will say that. I think this is utter rubbish to say that most ministers will receive bribes. And but for the fact that you are quite friendly and you wish to be friendly in this interview, I would have taken exception to the question, but I assume that you asked it with good intentions, so I've given you the answer.
But it's a fair question, isn't it? It's what most Indians talk about.
Well, please don't speak for most Indians. Most Indians will speak when they go to vote.
But you know what people say, that India only reforms when it's facing a crisis. That's what happened in 1991.
So when does the United States reform its health care? When does Britain reform its National Health Service? So I think a crisis...
But we're talking about India here.
Yeah, why talk about India as though something very unusual is happening in India? Yes, of course, a crisis puts pressure. But we have done so many reforms when there was no crisis.
And so India is closer to a crisis now because of this ballooning budget deficit.
Actually, if you look at it objectively, the Indian economic situation is much better than the situation in many, many countries. But that doesn't mean we don't face problems.